Thank you. It's great to be here. I was thinking about, a couple days ago, my daughter, who's serving as my assistant right now, I said, what am I supposed to be speaking about in Dallas? And she said something leading through the valley of the shadow of death. And I said, I wasn't sure how we were even supposed to go there. What's that really all about? And she said, well, Dad, I really don't know. It reminded me of two other times that I was asked to speak that on a subject that I kind of wondered what it was supposed to be about. One of them was I was speaking at a large conference of pastors in Mexico, and since I prepare so far ahead, about 2 days before I was supposed to fly down there, as I walked out in my office, I said to my assistant, oh, by the way, what's my topic in Mexico? And she said, it's the sound of the turtle dove. I said, what does a turtle dove sound like? I have no idea. What am I supposed to talk about? She said, I don't know, but that's the topic. The other time was one time I walked out. I was going to speak to a group of Lutheran pastors. I walked out the door, and she handed me my file. I was on my way, actually, to speak to them. And I said, where am I going? And she said, to the Budweiser Brewery. I said, you're kidding me. She said, nope, that's where you're going, to speak to the Lutherans. And she was right. I got there, and they were all at the open bar, and I talked about them being a sweet, sweet savor in the scent in the middle of society. So I don't know how it went over, but anyway, that's what it was. Let me just say a word about Family Research Council, and if you're not a part of that, I want to encourage you to be. I think that in this day, more than ever, we need a united voice. And God has raised up more groups than Family Research Council, but they are certainly a leading one that helps network voices together. And when we came under fire in Houston, Tony stepped up big time and stood behind us, and his voice and a couple of others rallied the nation to our defense. And this mayor, who wouldn't listen to any voice of reason at all, the only reason she even withdrew the subpoenas at all was because the pressure from all across the country was so great. And if you were one of those voices, I want to thank you for speaking up. And people in your church, we receive things from everywhere. And in this hour, if we'll do that, it will make a big difference. One of the things the mayor asked for in her subpoena was everything that we had ever that I'd ever meditated on. And I thought, good luck with that. At my age, I don't even remember what I meditated on last week, but if you need it that bad, just try to figure it out for yourself. What I want to do in the moments I have is I want to just talk about 5 things that, as I look back over the time at Grace, that I've done in my judgment anyway, in preparing the congregation to face the day. They're very simple. Hopefully they're very practical, and they're pragmatic, and that hopefully they'll help you come up with whatever it is for you to have a strategic plan in getting the folks ready for the day of battle. I don't think you just all of a sudden one day wake up and go out and fight. I think that if that's where we are horribly prepared then for the war that's in front of us. So if we want to get a congregation of people ready, it seems to me we should ask the question, what do we do? So I want to mention 5 things very quickly. The first one is that we have to, I think before action, we have to educate the congregation. And if you come around Grace, you will hear, and the city of Houston has heard from me on every occasion where standing on moral values has been deemed political. I will never let that pass without responding by saying, I don't care if it's the mayor, city council member, if it's somebody else in government, or if it's a newspaper reporter, I will say, this is not politics. This is higher than politics. This is moral values. And I think across the nation it would be important if we who are leading start by correcting and not allowing that kind of speech to happen where the political spin is constantly put on things without saying, this is not about politics. It transcends parties. This is about deeply held values, moral values that are the underpinnings of the nation. So what I've done over the years, I've done my best to educate the congregation on the nature of the day. What kind of day are we in? So that the talk show hosts and the people on the side of political correctness and those who are of the progressive mindset, those who are trying to redefine the day and change the day and fundamentally change the nation, that there's another voice to that. If the congregation never hears it from you, then all they have to hear it from is everybody else. So I've tried to educate the congregation on the nature of the day. We have done our best to educate them on the history of the nation, because our very history is being redefined. I never thought in my lifetime I would have to talk about things that had to do with the founding fathers and the foundation of this nation. But we are in that kind of day, and there's a lot of great resources out there for you to use in making sure that you don't take for granted that the congregation knows things about our past that they need to know for this present. I've tried to educate them on their privilege and responsibility as Americans. That in America, I just said this a week or so ago to the church. In America, you are the king. The president is not the king. Neither is the senator. In America, the people are. That's the uniqueness of this nation, that all government begins and ends with you at the ballot box. At least it is supposed to. And whenever there are those like our mayor who decides that she is above the system, she is above the people, then the people should stand up and hold them to account. I've tried to educate them on the difference in consequences between individual sin and national corporate sin. Because there's a lot of talk today about, well, if someone is gay or this or that, well, it's just, I don't really believe that, but if they want to believe it, well, there are personal consequences to personal sin. But when there is enough personal sin, when the culture buys into particularly moral sin, the consequences are national. And it's important for the folks who are praying and who are leading and who are giving, who are part of our congregations, to understand that. And understand what will open the door to the judgment of God upon the nation and lead to the demise of not only the culture, but of the nation itself. When there are significant issues, as we've been facing lately, I always put out a very clear statement, a statement that has a clear biblical position, so that I reinforce. We did that on Planned Parenthood. We just did it on the Supreme Court. On the Supreme Court issue, when they made that decision, I did a 4-week series called Why the Land Mourns. And I taught the congregation again, why? Why does this matter? So that they are educated. The second thing I think that's important is that you not only have to educate the congregation, because people have to know more than facts. You have to challenge them with the cause. And here's the thing. I'm never going to challenge the congregation to stand unless I'm willing to. See, I don't really believe you're a leader unless you're leading. I don't think leadership is a position. You all know, don't you, that if you want to know who's in charge in a room, you got everybody around the table. If you just sit there at the table and they all introduce themselves, and this one's the chairman of the board, and that one's the vice chairman, and this one's and all that. If you just sit there for a while and listen, and you just ask one question, just ask one tough question, everybody at the table will look at who's really in charge, who the real leader is. So, if you're the leader, it's real important that you're willing to stand up. This is not if you're going to be the leader, while you need to be in the crowd to lead the crowd, not so far beyond the crowd they can't see you. Leading is being the first one to put your foot in the water. So I have a question. Is the plight of our nation important enough for you to spend your influence, your position, your fame, your fortune, your reputation, your popularity, to stand against the present onslaught of evil? And if not, you'll never call forth an army unless you're willing to pay that price. Third thing, I not only have to challenge the congregation with the cause, I have to prepare them to engage. How do we do that? Well, I think you do that by building commitment before you have a crisis. So you start working on things. You know, you start building an army. You start turning the congregation from being a group of consumers into being really fully devoted followers of Christ, which means they are willing, in fact, to deny themselves and sacrifice. You know, if your building's all paid for, you don't need any money, everything's great, and you're just kind of happy where you are, you'll never have a committed group of people unless they're going for something. They're challenged to sacrifice in some way for a cause that's bigger than themselves. So how do you do that? Well, a lot of ways, and I'm just going to mention a couple. But for example, let me give you one. Governor Perry, a number of years ago, called for a prayer meeting at Reliance Stadium in Houston. And about 40,000, maybe a little more, 40-some thousand people showed up for that. 10% of those people were from Grace. I'll tell you how I know. I'm not bragging about this. I'm going to tell you of some of these so you know. I just want you to have the basis of what I'm talking about, so you know that what I'm telling you is I'm not just a preacher up here preaching. Because 3 weeks before that, I had 3,400 people already signed up with cards. You know you get most of the volunteers in the last 3 weeks, right? So I had 3,400 3 weeks ahead. And when I got those, I said to the congregation, now look, this prayer meeting's on Saturday. It's going to cost you one of your weekend days. And if you're not coming, don't you sign that card just to make it look like you're going to be there. So unless you are absolutely committed to coming, how's that for thinning the list down? How did we get 10% there? Well, we didn't start with that one time when we all of a sudden decided to call the congregation. We began to get commitment in small things, in little ways. We taught the congregation to serve the city. You know, if you want to speak to the city, serve it first. The reason we have equity in the city of Houston and can speak to the city right now with some influence is because we serve the city. Amen. As a matter of fact, one of the reasons I can speak out on gay issues, I spoke to one of the leading gay activists in our city, and when I got done, he said to me, you know what, you're not like all those other guys. And I've been one of the most vocal people at all. He said, you're not like them. I said, what do you mean by that? He said, well, you're not a hater. I said, no, I'm not a hater. You know one of the things I said to him? I said, look, because we're having a pretty direct conversation, and I'm kind of a direct talker, if you haven't figured that out yet. You know, it's like, let's just get down to the stuff here. And I said to him, look, let me just tell you something. You know, so we're not just dealing with all this peripheral stuff out here. I said, remember when AIDS, everybody wore a mask with AIDS? Remember that? Everybody was afraid they wore AIDS. They wore a gown with AIDS. I said, when I went to the hospital, and I did a number of times when people were dying with AIDS, I never wore a mask and I never wore the gloves because I felt like people deserved to die with dignity. So when I knelt down by them and I put my ear right up by their mouth to hear their dying words, there wasn't somebody there who had created an environment they were protected from. I was in their space. And I said, there was a little place here in Houston that they had 10 or 12 rooms, and they took in people dying with AIDS who had run out of insurance, and nobody in the gay community would support them. Not people necessarily who had repented of their sin, just people were dying. I said, my wife and I took our girls down and we cleaned their rooms. And I said to him, have you done that? And he said, no. I said, then when you've done that, then you can come and talk to me about whether I care or I don't care, but until you've done what I've done. See, I think if we're willing to lay our lives down and really serve, it earns us something. It earns us some equity. And even if people don't agree with us, at least some respect. So I would encourage you to serve your city. The fourth thing is to begin to engage by standing up and speaking out. Remember, and I've said this a number of times in things with Tony, but listen, the giant is going to shout. So make up your mind that when the giant shouts, you're going to shout back. You know, don't be intimidated by the giant shouting. The fifth thing is at some point you have to run to the battle. At some point you have to run to the battle. There's a variety of ways to do that. We've done that in Houston with all the mayor and everything that's there and all of that. But before all of this happened in Austin, there was a group of people who took over the Senate when we were considering a bill to protect the life of the unborn at 20 weeks. And I was on the West Coast and I heard that, and it made me mad. I thought, what in the world? How come there was nobody in that Senate chamber, the 400 seats that are in there? Why was everybody there? And how could they shut down the Senate? And so I flew back home and I said, that isn't going to happen when they call this next session. We're going, all of us, we're going. So I got up in front of the church and I said, I want everybody that will take off work. It's going to cost you a day to drive 200 miles to Austin and show up at the Capitol. Now, we weren't the only church that did it, but we took buses. And we had hundreds of people show up. And I said, look, you're not all going to get inside. We're going to take every seat we can. We got there 5 o'clock in the morning. We formed this big line. I said, you're going to get every seat, but I want all of you standing in line all day long outside this door. Because if you left and had to go to the bathroom, you couldn't get back in. Somebody took your spot. So I said, I want you standing in line so that the next person in is a person with our color shirt. And Rick Scarborough and I, we sat there all day long. I prayed for Lieutenant Governor Dewhurst before he went out for that session on that day. And the Senate voted to put that law in effect. And about 2 months later, a couple in our church called me. They'd never been able to have kids. She'd had a couple of miscarriages. And she said, hey, Steve, there's a little baby that they just called us we can adopt. And she said, the mother, the young girl, went down to the clinic to have an abortion. And she couldn't have one because this baby just turned 20 weeks old. So they got that little baby. And I called up David Dewhurst. He was the lieutenant governor. And I said, look, he was in the middle of campaign. I said, I don't know what you're doing on Sunday, but if you can break away, I need you to come to Grace on Sunday. So he said, okay, I'll be there. So he came. We walked up on the stage, and I took that little baby, and I put it in his arms. And I said to our church, look, when everybody tells you this is about politics, I want to tell you this is not about politics. This is about this right here. If we'll have that voice, we'll stand like that, God will turn this nation around. Remember last summer when many of you rode buses, you drove your cars up to Austin because we had a group of people who literally took over the Senate chambers and kept our Senate from doing business. And so we decided we would all show up so that we could save some lives. Now I want to tell you why I asked them to come. This little baby right here, came up for adoption. The little girl who was pregnant, who didn't know who the dad was, went down to get an abortion. And she couldn't get an abortion because this little baby had just turned 20 weeks old. So the next time somebody says to you that this is about politics, I want you to remember I want this to be etched in your mind. This is what it's about right here.
The sacrifice that you and your staff and your other legislators made. We have our son today.
When there's a time when you have stood courageously, as Lieutenant Governor Dewhurst has done, and here we stand today with the fruit of that, this little baby, the Lieutenant Governor ought to get the credit for his leadership. And so as the people of Grace, I want you to thank him today.